Hi friends, welcome to Tackleknowledgechannel. So today we are going to see about the plasma membrane. Plasma membrane definition. The plasma membrane of a cell is a network of lipids and proteins that forms the boundary between a cell contents and the outside of the cell. So plasma membrane of a cell is a network of a lipid and proteins. As we have seen earlier that the cell membrane is in bilayer form, right? So in that bilayer form the proteins and lipids are embedded into the membrane, right? So it is forming like a network of lipid and proteins that forms the boundary between a cell contents and the outside of the cell. So it is forming a boundary of the cell. Okay, it also simply called the cell membrane. So it can also be called as a cell membrane. Okay, cell membrane. The main function of plasma membrane is to protect the cell from its surrounding environment. So if we see the plasma membrane, it is going to protect from the surrounding environment. Okay, it is a semi-permeable and regulates the material that enter and exit the cell. So it is a semi-permeable membrane. So plasma membrane is a semi-permeable membrane and it regulates semi-permeable membrane and regulates the material that enters and exit the cell. So the materials which are entering the cell and exiting from the cell are regulated by this membrane. Okay, the cells of all living things have plasma membrane. So the living things which are containing the cells are having plasma membranes. Okay, functions of the plasma membrane. So let's see about the functions of the plasma membrane. A physical barrier. The plasma membrane surrounds all cells and physically separates the cytoplasm. So if we see the physical barrier of the plasma membrane surrounds the all cells, right? So this is the plasma membrane which is surrounding all the cells and physically separates the cytoplasm, right? So it is having a cytoplasm which is physically separating the cell, right? Okay, which is the material that makes up the cell from the exterior fluid outside the cell. So this cytoplasm is a material which is making up the cells from a extracellular fluid from the outside of the cell. Okay, this protects all the components of the cell from the outside environment and allows separate activities to occur inside and outside of the cell. So likewise outer side of the cell, so the cell has been protected by this plasma membrane. So all the components of the cells from the outside the environment are going to allow and separate the activities to occur inside and outside of the cell. Okay, the plasma membrane provides structural support to the cells. So plasma membrane is providing a structural support to the cell. Okay, it tethers the cytoskeleton, which is a network of protein filaments inside the cell that hold all the parts of the cell in place. So it is having a cytoskeleton, right? This cytoskeleton is having a network of protein filaments. Okay, and the cell is holding all the parts of the cell in one place. So the cytoskeletons are holding the parts in one place. Okay, thus it is giving structure to the cell. Okay, this gives the cell its shape. So cytoskeleton is giving cell shape, right? Okay, it is giving the cell shape. Certain organisms such as plants and fungi have a cell wall in addition to the membrane. So if we see certain organisms like plants and fungi, they are having a cell wall. Okay, they are having a cell wall which is a rigid in nature. Okay, so it is having a membrane also. Okay, it is having a plasma membrane as well as it is covered with the cell wall. Okay, it is covered with the cell wall which is rigid in nature. So this is in the plants and fungi case. Okay, these are in plants and fungi case. Okay, The cell wall is composed of molecules such as cellulose. So this cell wall is made up of cellulose, okay, cellulose molecules. It provides additional support to the cell, and it is why plant cells do not burst like animal cells do if too much water diffuses into them. So if we see the plant cell and animal cell variation, so plant cell is having a cell wall, right? So plant cell is having a cell wall, so it will not easily burst, okay. The cell wall is protecting the plant cell wall. This is in the case of a plant where the cell wall is present, right? So it is protecting the plant so that it will not burst. While if we see in the animal cell, when water is diffusing into the cell, the cell is going to burst, right? So as the water is filling inside the cell, it is going to burst. But in the plant case, it is not so. Why? Because it is having a cell wall which is protecting the cell, okay. So this is the difference between animal cell and a plant cell, okay. Now let's see about the selective permeability. Plasma membranes are selectively permeable or semi-permeable. So plasma membranes are selectively permeable, right? Selectively means only certain type of molecules are allowed, okay. Semi-permeable means it's a same case, okay. They are going to allow only certain molecules to pass through the membrane, meaning that only certain molecules can pass through them, right? So as earlier I have said that there are certain molecules can pass through plasma membrane, okay. They are water, oxygen and carbon dioxide can easily travel through the membrane. So water, oxygen and carbon dioxide are going to easily travel through this membrane, okay. Generally ions, sodium, potassium and polar molecules cannot pass through the membrane. They must go through specific channels or pores in the membrane instead of freely diffusing through. So if we see this ions like sodium and potassium and polar molecules, they cannot pass through this membrane easily, right? So they have to enter through channels only, okay. They have to pass through this specific channels only, then only they can enter into the cell, okay. So they cannot diffuse easily, okay. This way the membrane can control the rate at which certain molecules can enter and exit the cell. So in this way the membrane is controlling the rate of certain molecules which has to enter or which has to not enter in the cell, okay. Now let's see about the endocytosis and exocytosis. Endocytosis is when a cell ingests relatively larger content than the single ions or molecules that pass through the channels. So if we see the endocytosis, it is a cell which is ingesting the larger contents than the single ions or molecules, okay, which is passing through the channels. Through endocytosis, a cell can take in large quantities of molecules or even whole bacteria from the extracellular fluid. So in endocytosis, a cell can take a large quantities of a molecule, okay. They can take a large quantities of molecules such as bacteria, which is coming from the exterior to the interior, okay. Exterior cell fluidity to the interior cellular fluid. Exocytosis is when the cell releases these materials. So exocytosis means it is a cell is releasing these materials to the outside of the cell. So cell is going to release the waste products to the outer side of the cell, okay. The cell membrane plays an important role in both of these processes. So cell membrane is having an important role in both endocytosis and exocytosis processes, okay. The shape of the membrane itself changes to allow molecule to enter or exit the cell. So the shape of the molecule is deciding whether the molecule should enter the cell or exit the cell, okay. It also forms vacuoles, small bubbles of membranes that can transport many molecules at once. So it is also forms a vacuole and small bubbles of the membrane which can transport many molecules at a single time, okay, in order to transport materials to different places in the cell. So in order to transport those materials into different places in the cell, they are going to form a vacuoles or a small bubbles of membrane, okay. Now let's see about the cell signaling. Another important functions of the membrane is to facilitate communication and signaling between cells. So another important function of the membrane is to facilitate communication and signaling between cells, right? So it does so through use of various proteins and carbohydrates in the membrane. So it is going to communicate and signal through the process of various proteins and carbohydrates in the membrane. Okay. So these proteins and carbohydrates are present on the membrane. Proteins on the cell mark that cell so that other cells can identify it. So if we see the proteins on the cell mark on the cell, they are going to identify the other cell, okay, whether the cell has to enter or not. The membrane also has receptors that allow it to carry out certain tasks. So the membrane is having receptors which is allowing to carrying certain tasks when molecules such as hormones binds to those receptors. So whenever hormone signal is coming, it is going to bind to its receptor and it is going to transport the signal to the signal and communication to the particular molecules. Okay, so this is about the cell signaling. So okay friends, that's all about the plasma membrane. So if you like my video, please kindly like, share and subscribe it with your friends also. Okay, thank you so much. Bye bye.